Okay, everybody, come on in, grab a virtual seat. Get started in just a moment. Hello to those who popped in with the comments of hello. And Michael, evening. Goodness. I didn't know you were over yonder. And I assume OctoPerf is probably Quentin saying hello. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. By the way, Guillaume, can you hear me? Because I didn't hear you say that when I asked if you thought that was Guillaume.
Oh,
Sorry, if that was
yes, I
Quentin.
heard
Okay,
you very fine.
good. All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another presentation of the online ColdFusion Meetup. I'm Charlie Earhart, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. And in this edition of the Meetup, our 302nd, being recorded on Thursday, June 15th, 2023 at noon U.S. Eastern Time, we've got Guillaume Betaillouux, which is an American way of bastardizing it, but I'll let him straighten us out. And he's here to talk about OctoPerf, the load testing tool for modern web apps. And before I turn it over, I just want to say a couple things. If you look at the bottom of the screen, for those who maybe haven't heard about the ColdFusion Meetup, the URL is just coldfusionmeetup.com, and it's a group that's existed for many years and has about 3,000 meetup.com members. And the meeting is being recorded, and those that are watching it, the YouTube URL you're looking at, that will be the URL where the meeting recording will be. And then I also post the recordings after the event at recordings.coldfusionmeetup.com. So if you want to look back over the previous 300 messages, you can find them. All right. And if you're ever interested in presenting on the online ColdFusion Meetup, down at the bottom, you see I've got a link called speak.coldfusionmeetup.com, and you can learn more about that. Happy to have anybody talk on anything that's either about CF or, as in this case, related to it. This is something that CF people could leverage. And so with that, I will now go ahead and turn it over to Guillaume. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Charlie. glad you had me here. And no, you're not far apart from my name. It's Guillaume Betaillouloux. So that's
Thanks, sir.
quite good. As I told you before the meeting, a lot of people in
Good.
France even can't pronounce it correctly. So
Thank you.
Anyway, just a quick heads up about OctoPerf before we dive into the demo. Just to say that some of you might have heard about JMeter, an open source load testing tool. Well, basically, OctoPerf is a studio around JMeter where we provide a modern UI to make it easier to operate so that you don't have to go through all the usual troubles of open source, if you see what I mean. So that's what I'm going to show you today. I will log in the platform and I will create a new project so that we can do a load test together. Should take us about 20 minutes. Feel free to ask your question in the chat. I'll see if I can answer right away or if I answer at the end. So let's go ahead with a new project. I'll just call it demo. It's not very, it's like all the others, but this was one of the top. The first step is to create the users we will launch against our server later. We have a couple of options to get started in OctoPerf. For instance, if you're using Postman to do API testing on your end, you can import it. If you're already a JMeter user, you can also reuse it. But the one we're going to use for this demo is the HAR record because it's the most versatile one. You can record from a lot of different sources. And when I say that, I mean all modern day browsers, which are compatible here, but also proxy software. So if you have an app that's not entirely in a browser, you can also capture it this way. That's what makes it very convenient. I'm not going to go through the entire capture process, but I just want to say that it happens in your dev tools. Like here you have the, can't see it with the screen sharing. Anyway, you just open your dev tools using the inspect button or the F12 button. And the capture process is what you do in the network tab of the dev tools while you navigate on the application. In my case here, I already have an HAR recorded. But don't worry about that because if you're wondering about how to record HARs, we have documentation here showing how to go through this process. So it's very easy. I'm going to use an HAR I already have, as I said, and let's go ahead for this one right there. It's been captured earlier today, so that's the one I'm going to import. And when we do that, we get to the design screen where we can see the new script or new virtual user we created based on this traffic. The traffic is recorded from a web store, so we have a few steps in this web store. The first one you can see here is, I will rename it because it's the pre-home page. Then I know there's a second step where we go to the home page. If you see in the tree, you can already see all the different resources associated to the home page with the images and their names. Then we have another page which is a login page. So I mean, I will not do all the renaming like this because it would take too long, but it's just to give you a general idea of what this would look like when you do a proper renaming of all the steps and to make it easier. With that said, I like to start working on this using the search. So when I did the recording, I used the default account in this application, which, well, the login is J2EE. So if I search for it, I expect OctoPerf to locate the login request. And that's exactly what I've done. You see, by opening this one, which is also marked in the tree right there, well, we can see we have a post request. So we're sending something to the server. We can see the server and the path that is defined here. There's a lot of other parameters we have. Let me close this one a bit, save a bit of space on the right. We can see all the headers, but in terms of headers, the only one that really matters here is a cookie, and we'll see it's handled automatically, so nothing to worry about. Then we have the body of this request where we have the login and password. And what I like to do for now is to use a list of login and passwords. Because remember, we are going to generate a lot of different users with this. So we want to avoid using only one account when we do that. In order to do that, I go to variables on the left. In this menu, I can import a CSV. So that's what I'm going to do. Create a CSV. And when I click upload, I'll have a pop-up, but you can see the pop-up, but I'll upload a CSV file that I have on my local computer here. It's telling me that I'm going to use it with this syntax, which feels a bit weird because user1 and pass doesn't feel like a name, feels like a value. And in fact, that's because the CSV here doesn't have a header line. So we use the first line, which is a value, as a header name. So instead, I'm going to rename manually. So this way, better with 2S. There we go. So we're going to use login and password as variable names instead. So let me click here. I can click here to copy the variable name, or what I can do is, if I go back to my virtual user, I can edit it from there. So I remember the login request was there, but we could use the search again in case we're not completely sure. And to do the replacement, I can either paste the name I've just copied earlier, or I could use the auto completion because I have a auto completion available when I enter the beginning of a variable name, dollar curly brackets here. Can pick login from there, or I can use the autocomplete button to copy it from there as well. You see, we have two variables. The rest are built-in function that you can use, like if you want to generate current time or a random value or many other things. But in my case, I will stick to login and password here. Let's close the autocomplete for now. Now, a good thing to do would be to run this user to see if it's working fine. And when I say run, I mean this validation right there. But I'm going to run more than a one user. I mean, I'm going to run a one user, but I'm going to run it more than one time. Let's go run it for three iterations in a row. Let's go ahead. So what's happening here is we're running a real test, but with a single user. So if I open the logs, we can see it's getting started. We can even see the IP. If I'm going there, it's because at the end, we'll see the JMeter log. So if you're familiar with JMeter, this will give you some info about what's going on. We also see in the tree that it updates as the test progresses. We can see what's going on, and we'll dive into that in a minute when the test is finished. And there we go. We have a JMeter log. If you have done advanced things that would log messages in there, you'll be able to use it. But what I would like to focus on is the status dots we can see in there, like this one, which is red, 0 out of 3. What I can do is open it. And when I open it, I can use a debug to see what's going on. In the debug, I have the various metrics like the download time, the sizes, various sizes. What I'll do is go for other things instead, like the response headers, sorry. because in the response headers, we can see exactly what the server responded. And during the orange one, which is a recorded, if you've seen the color code on top, and during the green one, which is a validation here. In fact, both of them had the same response code, which is an error because this image doesn't exist. So, it's just a missing image. I will disable it because it's not such a big deal for our tests. I mean, of course, we want to fix it, but that shouldn't prevent me from running the test anyway. Another one that could be interesting is this one over there because it's 2 out of 3. So, it's not a complete failure this time. So if I click on debug again, we can check the request headers this time. And if you remember, I told you the cookie header would be handled automatically, and that's what we can see right there. Now, if we check the request body, we can see the request body contains a different username and password, which is pretty much what we expected. We went from J to EE to user1 and pass. And the response header seems correct. There we can see that we have, the same response code. Thing is, we ran 3 validation, if you remember, and the one that failed is number 3. If we check this one out, we can see the response code is different when we go for the validation. If we check out the response body or open it in a new tab, we will be able to see a message in there. So I'll just highlight it in the response body here because we have an error message telling us we have an invalid username here. So that's what's going on basically. So I would open it in a new tab, but since I'm only sharing this tab, you wouldn't see it on the screen sharing. So anyway, it would just highlight it and make it very easy to see. What I will do before we continue is to insert a custom control on this request. Because now that I know I will be facing this error message, I would like to capture it. So I'll say, okay, there's a login OK control here, and it will control this value. I copied it from earlier. But I want this to be successful when we do not have this message here, hence the negative pattern I've just checked. So let's go for a save and a debug to see how it works. If we check out the recorded and the validations, they seem to work. But the number 3, this one fails, because if you remember, that's the one where we had the problem. So now we have this control on top of the usual control, which will fail this request if we get the error message from the server. But before I continue, I would like to highlight there's a lot of other things we could be doing, like adding conditions, loops, custom controls, or even coding some behaviors, like we have a script block we can use. I mean, OctoPerf is not entirely no code. It's more low code because you can script a few things there and there if you need to handle advanced behaviors. It's also compatible with all the JMeter plugins. But just to finish about that, I will roll back to the design screen where we can see our virtual user. First, I will rename it because, this name is rather long, so I'd prefer to save up space in the report with a shorter name. And I want to highlight that here you can hit download in order to have this, to download this virtual user in JMX format, which is a JMeter format. Well, the point of this feature is to show you that the exit door is always open with OctoPerf. You can go back and forth. You can export your JMX to a local JMeter, or you can re-import it at a later time in OctoPerf. And with that, I'd like to move on to runtime. The idea is to run the test together, but first, know that we will configure a runtime scenario, but these can be run from our scheduler instead of being run manually. These can also be run from third-party tools like CI platforms, or for instance, we have a Jenkins plugin, but we have plugins for pretty much every CI tool available, be it GitLab CI or Azure DevOps or any of the other. But for that, I need to actually have a runtime scenario configured. Runtime scenarios are a mix of what we call user profiles. I have a single one right there. I can click to edit it. It's running my buyer virtual user. Keep in mind, you can have several different virtual users in the project. We could have one that is only going through, I don't know, browsing and not doing any logging, or any type of virtual user you want. And we'll see that we can add several user profiles to run them all at the same time. This one is running from Paris, which is quite fun in this case because the application I'm testing is right next to Paris, so this will make the response time very good. We can change that later anyway. And we have a load policy, which is to run 10 users over the course of 5 minutes and maintain that for another 5 minutes. We could click anywhere in there to add some, points to define the how the load will behave. So we could go high and when we can increase the load and reduce it, pretty much do anything we want. But most of the time we'll use a transform window to do that because you can pick one of the patterns we have in there, like this one where we can run ramp up and ramp down users. I will go for 50 to make it a bit more interesting. We don't need much more to, in the pet store anyway, on the application I'm testing anyway. We could keep editing this one, but I'm pretty satisfied with how it looks. We'll have a 1 minute ramp up to 50 users. We will maintain them up to 9 minutes and then ramp down. We will probably be done with the demo by then, so it's okay. Let's save this one and actually duplicate it, because this way I can change something on the duplicate. And in fact, what I want to change is the cloud location. I'll be going for a different location, one in the US. There we go. So let's save it. Now we can see we have Paris and California. The point of doing this is the application being in Paris, I expect to have very different response times. So it will allow me to show you how to use filters in the report to highlight this difference. But of course, it could be different virtual users. It could be different settings for pretty much anything, because there's a lot of settings in this screen. And you can add more than 2 groups, obviously, if you want to test different configurations. But in my case, I will proceed to launch a test this way. The launch test screen is not very interesting, so let's skip to the test starting screen. We will make sure to start the load generators for you. So that's one of the big advantages of OctoPerf. You don't have to worry about the hardware. You could install your load generators on your premises if the application you're testing is not public. So there's always this possibility. But I am using the our public cloud load agents here in order to test our public demo application. Now the test is running. So we can see the test, we can see the progress bar here, which is slowly filling up. Obviously, we are just getting started. I like to highlight that the left menu here is similar to what we had in the design, but it also allows us to navigate, and we can right click to add anything else. Like if I wanted to add some monitoring of the machines running the test, we have it in there. Not that we have to check it because there will be alerts if there's anything wrong with them, but we could make sure it's all okay. We have a first graph right there where we can see the user counts. We're slowly getting up to 50 or pretty much almost there. We should get up to 100 in a few seconds. The hit rate is the number of containers per second. Container, if you remember, are transactions or pages in the application. And we have our average response time here, which is, I mean, it's very steady, but it doesn't really tell us the full picture because it's average across everything in the test. So what I'll do is click Edit, which gets us to this screen where we can configure the curve we're seeing. We could change a metric we are seeing, like pick another one, and there's a lot of metrics in this report. What I would go for instead is the location. I would like to filter this response time on the location. I'm going to save it, and I will duplicate it because this second response time, we will filter it on the other location. So this way we have the response time for the 2 different locations of our test on the same graph. If I go back to the main display, we can see Paris is very low, whereas California is a bit higher, obviously because it's much further away compared to the load generator in Paris, which is next to the application. Now, there's a lot of other things we could be checking out in this test report. I mean, we probably won't have the time to go through all of them, but just to highlight a few, there is a result tree where we can see the response times and a couple of other metrics for our containers, but also for requests inside them. Like here we can see it for the home page, but also for every request involved in the home page. We can also edit this one, same as any other, by updating by clicking in the legend below the graph. The one I'm interested into in this result tree is the one that fails a lot. Right there, you can see 33% error rate. Should be a big cause for concern. If we click it, you can see that, okay, yeah, it's this one right there, account.action. It's failing roughly 1 time out of 3. If we want to check this out, we could go to the error section in the report at the bottom, where we can see, a few error messages. The one I'm interested into is the account.action here, where we can see, there's an assertion message because there's a text that we expected not to have, which is in there. If I click inspect, I see the details. We have been using this login and password, and the password should have 2S. So what's happening is I have a few incorrect values in my CSV dataset, if you remember when we imported the CSV file. And this is what triggered these errors. So that's what we can see right there, plus our control from earlier that is highlighted here. But anyways, to show you, you can see the request content, the response content, so you can diagnose what's going on even while the test is running. Now, talking about the report, there's a lot of other things, as I've already mentioned. One of them is the response code over time. This one is a good one to check that your server is not going down, because if it were, I would expect to see a lot of 400 or 500 error codes because nothing's going through. But so far, so good for us. I mean, there's a few errors, but we know where they come from. Login is invalid. We could check the response times, the top response times per transaction, see which one is the worst and is it better or worse. We could check the response time for the connect time, time to first byte, and response time. These are three subsets of the average response time, with latency being time to first byte. I know it's in the JMeter word, it's called this way, but it's not network latency. It's actually the time to get the first response byte. But anyway, checking these, we can see that we spend most of the time waiting for the first response byte, so not too much time spent on the network, which is always a good sign. And many other things as I've already highlighted. So what I'll do to finish with this test report is show you can export this as a PDF. So I'll just stop it. And this will allow me to export right there. So let's go there, click export. Now you see we have save as PDF, but before we do that, we could check it out. So we see the test was stopped in the middle, but it's okay for the demo. We've got more than we need, more information than we need already. We can see we have these graph with Paris versus California that's already available. So we can everything we've configured is already in there, and we can check it out. Now I can go back on top and click Save as PDF, where we will generate the PDF. This is always an interesting option because this allows us to share it fairly easily. We can just share the PDF with other people. What you could also do, I mean, you don't see it because it's in my browser, but the URL, the address of this report can be shared with your colleagues. And you can give access to your colleagues to the workspace by editing it. Like I could go there and say, okay, typically this guy which works at OctoPerf, he's a tester here. So he has access to everything in this workspace. He can update it. He could be admin, where he could add users himself, or he could just be a viewer, so he can't break anything, but he can look at everything. Anyway, just to say that you can, add different rights to your colleagues to access tests you've been running in a workspace. I am switching to another workspace because I like to show you the result comparison. And well, to compare reports or results, I need to have a few. So that's why I'm going to this one. Already I've run a few of these. You see, we have 5 test reports here with some highlights or trends, as we call them. It's not much, but it tells you, a very basic overview of what's been going on during this test. If you'd like to go take it further, you can go to new comparison report, and based on what you see above, you could say, okay, like here I have 2 to 5 selected, or I could go for 1 instead here. You just select the ones you would like to compare up to 4 test results, and they will be highlighted above. Let's go ahead and create a comparison report this way. So now we have information about several tests into a single report. We can sort, for instance, the transaction response time one by one here and see the percentage of difference between one test to the other. That's always an interesting view because you can see if it's getting better or worse, especially if you do incremental tests. This way you'll be able to tell if it's improving things or not. And even the results name can be edited or pretty much everywhere. Every time you try to update a metric, compared to before, you see we have an additional selection that is a result set you want to pick a metric from. So like here we are displaying a write response time from test result 2. Anyway, that's the rest of it is pretty much the same report, but with information from all these tests. Before we take some time for your questions, I'd like to highlight there's a live chat in OctoPerf. This live chat allows you to ask all your questions in real time. So you just ask your question and we answer under a few minutes. So it's a very helpful and very useful way to get information from us, or to ask if you have any question. So really, whatever you need, feel free to use it for that. So with that, this was a quick overview. I hope you appreciated it. I hope it was clear. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send them in the chat, or
Well, thanks, sir. And while we wait for any follow-up questions anybody may have, I don't think you showed your website, right? And
That's a very good thing you asked, because I was actually going there. So I was
and then to
thinking the
point out
same thing.
also that there's a free plan, because people
Yeah.
sometimes when they're getting started with a new tool, it's nice to
Mhm.
know that they don't have to pay to try it out, and it's got generous capabilities in that free plan.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for the perfect transition. You can just go to octoperf.com and click Get Started, and you get a free account with 50 concurrent users. So basically half of what I've been running during this demo, you get it for free with no expiration date. So you can try it out, and there's also a chat right there. So if you have any question, same thing. And I should point out that we have tutorials. We have interactive tutorials you can use. Like I mentioned the HAR recording, but since I was sharing my tab, I couldn't show you the DevTools. So just to show you a bit more here, you can follow these tutorials, which will show you, okay, how to open the DevTools, how to generate an HAR file. Here, what are the options I need to follow, and here can right click, save the HAR, and that's what we imported in OctoPerf at the beginning. Oh yeah, Michael, indeed, here's the answer. But thanks for asking. Thanks for asking. Hmm. So in any case, as I've already mentioned, if you get questions later, you can always ask them on the chat at OctoPerf. That's something we like in particular to, it's a very good way to quickly get a few info out of the way. And of course, you can always contact us by email.
And then also, while we wait for any follow-up, I'll say that, sometimes people, some people presume everybody knows about load testing tools, and they just need to know about distinction between one tool and another. But there's a lot of people who in their work just never get around to using any load testing tools. And so if you're really new to this stuff, they can be just amazing for solving problems that you might not have ever fathomed, from load testing to see, can you expect a certain amount of request traffic to survive, or where do things slow down, right? It can help with all that. Or effectively functionality testing, where you can say, hey, my app works this way today, I'll make some changes and then I'll run the test again in a week and say, does my test still work? Those are all capabilities that this tool supports, and others do. Do you want to speak in any way, Guillaume, to that?
No, yeah, you already said it. Indeed, indeed. It's so. I mean, problem is it's so obvious to me that I should
Yeah,
probably
it's
have mentioned it.
natural.
So you're
Sure,
right.
sure.
But yeah, load testing is a really good way to prepare for, I don't know, like advertisements you've been doing, or a big event like Black Friday or many others like it. And it's difficult to plan without doing load testing, because even the auto scaling and other mechanism that you think will take care of this for you, they need some planning, they need some optimizations. And even if you don't do it because of the big event, you could also do it because you want to save on your cloud bill, because you want to anticipate. So there's a lot of reasons why you can go through some load testing. And we really try to put it forward by having a tool that is very competitive and also very modern, so that you can start doing at least something fairly quickly and get a quick ID. And if you want to take it further, it's also possible. As I said, we have a lot of tutorials. We also do trainings. We can also help you with this. So But yeah, we are trying to put load testing out there and have more people do it.
And he mentioned cloud, and it's always also worth clarifying that some people, believe it or not, are still not working in cloud infrastructures and cloud native deployments. They're just still working on bare metal or hosted server, or maybe in a Docker container on their own local machine, whatever. And tools like this can absolutely work with them. The tool does not care where the traffic is going at all. And it's also good to point out that some people have not used load testing tools, and they're wondering, can my application on its current architecture handle a certain load? And that's, of course, where a load test tool can really help, because you can crank up the volume. By the way, the free version was limited to 50 concurrent users, but each of those users can also be indicated to make a certain number of requests per second, right?
Yes, we usually recommend something around 1 request per second per user. That's a guaranteed amount. It's possible to go higher, but it can be challenging depending on the application. But of course, you can take it a lot further by contacting us, and we can provide a plan for you to go higher than that. But 50 requests per second already covers a lot of requirements from a lot of websites, at least to get a quick ID.
Right.
And also,
So think about that, folks, is that does mean if with 50 users, each doing 1 request per second, you can simulate 50 requests per second. And that may not sound like much to some people, but it's probably a lot more than most apps generally do get under even reasonable load. Again, I know it's easy to not, I'm saying to you, but I'm saying to everybody, it's easy for IT people to fall into the trap that think that every site is incredibly busy. Every site gets tens of thousands of concurrent users. Every site must get hundreds or thousands of requests per second. And the truth is, no, really, a lot of sites do not. And when you have good tools that can tell you that, well, I'm saying you might then find out somebody thinks you can handle a certain amount of load and you don't know for sure. And you might wonder, well, here again, you could fire up a load testing tool and you could at least answer that question. Hey, look, I was able to do 50 requests per second. And somebody might go, well, that's nothing. But if that's not what your server was previously handling and you show that it can handle it, well, at least you can say, I'm able to handle that. And there's value in that. So I'm just trying to help people think through ways to, and good, you showed the OctoPerf on-premise. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's also OctoPerf is also an enterprise solution that you can deploy in-house. We work with banks and insurance companies, so where privacy is important, and you don't want to put everything in AWS, or at least not in a public SaaS solution. So in that case, it's possible to install everything in-house. The main prerequisite is Linux and Docker. As long as you can manage with Linux and Docker, you can quickly deploy OctoPerf. We provide a single command line using Docker Compose that will run all you see on the screen at once for you. So it can look scary, appear scary, but it's not. Using Docker. It can be deployed in a single command line.
And let's go further and say that if anybody may be watching this and they're on a Windows machine and think, oh, goodness, that won't help me. No, that's not true. Look into Docker Desktop. which is available free. That there's different plans, and depending on the size of your company, blah blah blah. Look into that with Docker Desktop. But once you have Docker Desktop, then you can run it on, or you're showing even on WSL. So Docker Desktop handles all that for you. Or yes, you could implement WSL yourself and implement Docker in the WSL yourself. So there's lots of ways to do it. We'll leave it at that. And good for you for showing how to do it. By the way, I hadn't seen that page. Does it presume one is or is not using Docker Desktop?
We haven't tried with Docker Desktop. I mean, I've seen it's been updated a while ago. I haven't done a guide, but yeah, we should do
constantly,
it at some
Oh,
point.
you mean this guide
Well,
has been updated a while ago? Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, personally I'm running it with WSL2 because I like it to run in the background. I want to have the UI. But you know what? It's up to.
Well, but no, just to be clear, that's what Desktop does. It creates a
Yep.
WSL instance in the background. But for those who don't know, does this page go on to talk about once you would enable WSL, then you would just implement Docker, or do you presume they've already got it installed?
But after that, we give
there you go. You show them how to install Docker. Good. Yeah. So if anybody hasn't done any of this stuff, that's just great that you cover all these bases. Because again, I work with people every day. There's such a wide range of understanding of things, and it's easy for some people to fall into a trap of thinking that, well, everybody knows that, and no, they often don't, and they really do need that hand holding. Now bringing this back to your discussion, the Enterprise Edition of OctoPerf, I would assume that is only available on a paid plan.
No, you have a free version as well. 50
wow.
users, same thing.
Everybody.
So yeah, when you install it, you have a default license. Yep.
That's wonderful. So, again, some people would never have fathomed that. So it's great to hear it. And of course, you guys need revenue. So hopefully there's lots of reasons that people can be seeing that they should consider the paid version. And I've already seen enough of the site to show that I'm sure you clarify that somewhere. So yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. Get people in, let them try it capably, extensively, and then they realize, oh, I hit a limitation, but boy, it took a while for me to get there. Then when they hit that limitation, you've got them covered with a plan that takes them up to the next step. So that's great. Really great to see.
Yeah, sure. And if they just need the free version, well, yeah, they can piggyback. It's not a problem. I mean, we're always glad to have people using the product. So we like to put it out there for everyone to use.
And that's why I'm glad to have this. I had seen it, we've talked before a few years ago, and I just hadn't looked at things again recently to see. I'm really glad to see the things that you've got and what you've shared, and I'm glad we've had this opportunity to allow other people to see it. And again, this session has been recorded, so when the meeting's over, the URL that is in YouTube, it will be there. It'll be in the playlist. I'll put it on that recordings page, but you guys already have the URL, so you'll be able to share it. I will throw out that the chat, something weird about the way YouTube works, this live chat won't appear immediately. So that doesn't matter too much. Usually there's not a lot in the chat. What matters is the presentation. And then over time it will. So yeah, you can share this and spread the word. I'll look forward to doing the same. And I hope people will tell others about it. It's great to know that there's a great tool, and these guys are great guys. They've been great to work with, and I'm always happy to help people learn about new tools, especially from great people.
All right. Well, thank you.
You betcha. Anything you might want to say in closing?
No, thank you for the invitation. Glad we could show OctoPerf to your community, and
glad to help. All right, sir. Well, we'll leave it at that. It looks like there's no more chats coming in, so we'll go ahead and call it. And thanks very much, and look forward to hearing how things go in the future.
Yep.
Okay, man.
Thank you.
Again, see you, sir. So long, everybody.
See you. Bye-bye.